She's not family. 4 words that shattered my world when I needed support the most. 4 words that left my newborn daughter in foster care while I fought to get her back alone. Now, those same people who abandoned us are the ones desperately begging for a place in our lives. My name is Leila Moreno, and I'm 32 years old. 10 years ago, my parents chose their reputation over their own grandchild. They walked away when I needed them most, when a young, terrified mother had her baby taken by the state because she had nowhere to go. Have you ever been rejected by the very people who were supposed to love you unconditionally? Have you watched someone choose their pride over your well-being? Or maybe you've had to rebuild your life from nothing, while those who hurt you watched from a distance. That was me. But this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about rising from the ashes when everyone expects you to disappear. If my journey resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, the moment my parents realized they needed the daughter they discarded, that moment was worth every tear I shed. I grew up in Oak Ridge, a small Northern California town where gossip traveled faster than internet connections. My father, Victor, ran the most successful dental practice in town. My mother, Marisol, was the assistant principal at the local high school. We lived in that quintessential house with the white fence and manicured lawn that made neighbors envious. To everyone in Oak Ridge, we were the model family, the Morenos who had it all figured out. Sunday church, community fundraisers, holiday parties, we were everywhere, always smiling, always perfect. Behind closed doors, perfection came at a cost. Leila, a 94%? What happened to the other 6 points? My father would ask, examining my test scores with a frown that made my stomach twist. My older brother Mateo could get away with B's and the occasional C. He was the boy, the one who would carry on the family name. But me? I was the reflection of my mother, and in her mind, that meant flawless grades, impeccable manners, and a future that would make other parents jealous. A lady doesn't slouch, Leila, my mother would remind me, pressing her hand between my shoulder blades during dinner. A lady doesn't laugh so loudly. A lady knows when to speak and when to listen. I spent my childhood and teenage years trying to fill a mold that never quite fit. Piano recitals where my fingers trembled, not from nerves but fear of missing a note. Debate competitions, where second place meant a silent car ride home. Honor roll celebrations, where an A- felt like failure. Meanwhile, Mateo rebelled. He grew his hair long, started a garage band, and dated girls my parents disapproved of. Yet somehow, his transgressions were met with sighs and head shakes, mine with lectures and consequences. Boys will be boys, my father would say, ruffling Mateo's hair after catching him sneaking in past curfew. Girls don't have the same luxury of mistakes, Lila. My mother would counter when I asked why the rules were different. One wrong move can change your entire future. I didn't understand then how prophetic those words would become. The summer before my senior year, I finally found my voice. I started questioning the double standards, pushing back against the expectations. My parents saw it as defiance. I saw it as discovering who I actually was beneath years of performing for their approval. This attitude needs to stop, my father warned one night at dinner. You're heading down a dangerous path. I remember looking him directly in the eyes, something I rarely did, and saying, maybe it's not the path that's dangerous. Maybe it's the pressure you're putting on me to be someone I'm not. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother set down her fork, my father's jaw tightened, and Mateo stared at his plate. In that moment, I felt a shift, like I'd crossed an invisible line drawn years ago without my knowledge. I didn't know it then, but that dinner marked the beginning of the end of my place in the Moreno family. The foundation had cracked, and what came next would shatter it completely. Andre Castillo rolled into my life like a summer storm, unexpected, thrilling, and impossible to ignore. I met him at a friend's backyard party, the kind my parents thought I was too good for. He stood by the makeshift fire pit, laughing with friends, a leather jacket hanging loosely from his broad shoulders despite the August heat. You look like you could use this, he said, handing me a cold soda. Not alcohol. He noticed I wasn't drinking. That was the first thing that drew me to him. He saw me when others just looked. Andre was 19, worked at his uncle's auto shop, and had dreams of opening his own garage someday. He wasn't on the college track. He didn't come from money. He had grease under his fingernails that never fully washed away and spoke with the confidence of someone who had figured out who he was years ago. My parents hated him before they even met him. A mechanic? My mother's voice dripped with disdain when I mentioned him. Lila, you're headed to Stanford next year. You don't have time for distractions. But Andre wasn't a distraction. He was an awakening. When I was with him, I wasn't Victor and Marisol's perfect daughter. I was just Lila. He listened when I talked about wanting to help people, not just achieve status. He didn't care about my GPA or my college applications. He cared about my thoughts, my dreams, my laughter. You light up when you talk about becoming a nurse, he told me one night as we sat on the hood of his car, staring at stars from the town lookout. Your parents should see that passion. They want me to be a doctor or lawyer, I sighed. Something prestigious. What did you say? My mother's voice was deadly quiet. I took a deep breath. I'm pregnant, about 10 weeks. That mechanic boy? My father stood, his face flushing red. I nodded. Where is he now? My mother demanded. Gone. San Diego. My mother laughed, a cold, humorless sound that sent chills through me. Of course he is. What followed was hours of yelling, crying, accusations. How could I be so stupid? Didn't I understand what this would do to our family's reputation? What about college? My future? Everything they'd worked for. Not once did they ask how I felt. Not once did they offer comfort. There are options, my mother finally said, her voice calmer but ice cold. We can make this go away discreetly. No one needs to know. I'm keeping my baby, I said, my hand instinctively moving to my still flat stomach. My father slammed his hand on the table. Not in this house. You're not. What? You have a choice, Lila, my mother said, every word precise and cutting. You can terminate this pregnancy and stay, or you can leave. We will not have this shame under our roof. I stared at them. These people who had raised me, who had taught me about family values and unconditional love, now showing me the fine print on that contract. You're throwing me out? Your own daughter? You did this to yourself, my father said, turning away. You chose this path. That night, I packed what I could into my school backpack and a small duffel bag. Clothes, toiletries, the $220 from my emergency cash stash. As I headed for the door, my mother stood in the hallway, arms crossed. When you come to your senses, we'll welcome you back, she said, as if offering a kindness. I walked past her without a word, stepped into the cold night air, and felt the door close behind me with terrifying finality. The first night away from home, I slept on my friend Jessica's couch, crying silently into a borrowed pillow. Her parents were kind but uncomfortable. A pregnant teenager wasn't part of their household plan either. The message was clear. I could stay a few days, no more. Those days turned into weeks of shuffling between friends' couches, each stay growing shorter as parents became concerned about enabling me or the example I set for their children. My social circle shrank with each passing day. You can crash at my place, my debate team partner Zoe offered after I confided I had nowhere to go. But my mom said just until Friday. School became a nightmare. Whispers followed me through hallways. Teachers who once praised my work now looked at me with disappointment, or worse, pity. My perfect GPA began to slip as I struggled to focus between bouts of morning sickness and the constant worry about where I'd sleep next. I got a job waiting tables at Denny's, working the overnight shift so I could still attend school. My uniform hid my growing belly for a while, but by month 5, there was no disguising it. The manager moved me to back prep work, away from customers who might be uncomfortable. Every night, I collapsed into whatever temporary bed I had, my feet swollen, back aching, Homework incomplete. Every morning, I woke up more exhausted than the day before. But with each flutter of movement in my belly, my resolve strengthened. This baby, my baby, deserved better than this struggle. Somehow, I would provide it. I called my parents once, during month 6, when I developed a urinary tract infection and couldn't afford the antibiotics. My mother answered on the 4th ring. "Mom," I said, my voice breaking, "I need help. I'm sick, and the baby." "Lila," she interrupted, her voice carefully controlled. "Our position hasn't changed. Unless you're calling to tell us you've reconsidered your options." I hung up, sliding down the wall of the pharmacy bathroom, phone clutched to my chest. A kind pharmacist saw me that day, red-eyed and desperate. She helped me apply for emergency Medicaid on the spot. "This will cover your prenatal care too," she explained gently. "You should be seeing a doctor regularly." By the time I went into labor, I was staying at a women's shelter downtown. I'd been there 3 weeks, the longest I'd been in one place since leaving home. The shelter coordinator drove me to the hospital at 2 a.m. when my contractions started coming 5 minutes apart. "Is there anyone you want us to call?" the nurse asked as they hooked me up to monitors. I shook my head, fighting back tears. "There's no one." 16 hours later, Ava Rose Moreno came into the world. 6 pounds, 4 ounces of perfection with a head of dark hair and lungs that announced her arrival with impressive force. When they placed her on my chest, skin to skin, the universe narrowed to just us two. "Hello, beautiful," I whispered, counting her tiny fingers, memorizing her face. "It's you and me now." For 3 days, we stayed in that hospital room, the most stable housing we'd had in months. I dreaded discharge, knowing we were heading back to the shelter with its strict rules and shared spaces. But I had a plan. 2 more months of saving every penny from my job, then a tiny studio apartment I could afford on my waitress salary. The morning we were scheduled to leave, a hospital social worker named Diana came to my room. Her expression was serious, her clipboard clutched tight. "Lila, we need to discuss your discharge plan," she said, sitting beside my bed while I nursed Ava. "We're going back to the shelter," I explained, "just until I save enough for our apartment." Diana's face softened with sympathy. "Lila, I've reviewed your situation. You're 18, homeless with limited income and no family support. These are significant risk factors." My arms tightened around Ava. "What are you saying?" "I'm required to file a report with Child Protective Services," she said quietly. "They'll assess whether your current situation is suitable for a newborn." My world tilted. "You're taking my baby?" "It's not like that," Diana insisted. "It's a temporary measure until you can provide stable housing and demonstrate you can meet her needs." But it was exactly like that. 2 days later, a CPS worker arrived with foster care paperwork. Ava would be placed with a certified family until I could prove I was capable of caring for her. They called it a safety plan. I called it the worst pain imaginable. The moment they took her from my arms in that sterile hospital room haunts me still, her tiny face scrunched in confusion as unfamiliar hands lifted her, her cry, that newborn, searching wail, as she was carried away. The physical ache in my breasts, still full of milk for a baby no longer with me. Desperation drove me to make one last call home. Maybe seeing their granddaughter, this innocent baby, would change something in my parents' hearts. I used the shelter's phone, my hands shaking as I dialed the number I still knew by heart. My mother answered, her voice wary when she realized it was me. "Mom," I choked out, "they took Ava. CPS took my baby girl. Please, I need help. Just a place to stay so I can get her back." Her response cut through me with surgical precision. "She's not family," my mother said, her voice devoid of emotion. "You made your choices. Now live with them." The phone felt heavy as I set it down. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside me. The hurt transformed into something harder, more determined. If my family wouldn't help me, I would become my own family. If they wouldn't fight for Ava, I would fight twice as hard. That night, I made a promise to myself and my absent daughter. This separation was temporary. I would get her back, and I would build a life so secure that no one could ever take her from me again. Not CPS, not poverty, and certainly not the people who had thrown us away. If you've ever had to rebuild from absolute zero, hit that like button. This journey was just beginning, and what came next would test every ounce of my strength. The day after CPS took Ava, I sat in a windowless conference room across from Mrs. Bennett, my caseworker. Her gray pantsuit matched the walls, her expression neutral as she outlined what I needed to do to regain custody. Stable housing, steady income, parenting classes, regular visitation, counseling. She checked each item off on her clipboard. Complete these requirements and reunify. I get to see her though, right? My voice sounded strange in my ears, raw, desperate.
Supervised visits twice a week, 2 hours each.
Mrs. Bennett slid a paper across the table.
Her foster parents are the Harrisons. They live in Redwood Heights.
Redwood Heights was a 40-minute bus ride each way. With my work schedule and the shelter's curfew, those visits would require military precision planning. But I would have crawled across broken glass for those 4 weekly hours with my daughter. The first visit was at the CPS office. I arrived an hour early, hair washed, wearing my cleanest shirt. When Mrs. Harrison walked in carrying Ava, my heart nearly burst. 1 week apart felt like a lifetime.
She's doing well,
Mrs. Harrison said kindly, placing Ava in my arms.
taking her bottles like a champ.
I pressed my face to Ava's tiny head, breathing in her scent, noting every change. She seemed heavier, her eyes more alert. Had her hair grown? Was that a new expression? Each detail I'd missed felt like a personal failure. For 2 hours, I held her, sang to her, told her how much Mommy loved her and was fighting to bring her home. Mrs. Bennett watched from the corner, making notes. When time was up, handing Ava back to Mrs. Harrison felt like losing a limb. On the bus ride back to the shelter, an older woman noticed my tears. "New baby?" she asked. I nodded, unable to explain the complexity. How I was both a mother and not allowed to mother. "It gets easier," she said, patting my hand. "The sleepless nights, the crying. If only those were my problems." That night, I mapped out my battle plan. The shelter allowed residents to stay for 90 days maximum. I had 82 days left to find housing, increase my income, and start meeting CPS requirements. I took every shift available at Denny's. Morning, night, double shifts, it didn't matter. Each dollar brought me closer to Ava. Between shifts, I attended the mandatory parenting classes at the Family Resource Center downtown. Nights, I studied for my GED after dropping out of high school in my final semester. "You need to pace yourself," warned Monica, the shelter coordinator, finding me asleep over GED practice tests at 2 a.m. Exhaustion won't help you or your baby. But rest felt like luxury I couldn't afford. Time away from Ava was already a wound that wouldn't heal. Every minute not working toward reunification felt like failure. By day 60 at the shelter, I had saved nearly $2,000. Not enough for an apartment with first and last month's rent, but progress. My GED test was scheduled for the following week. The parenting class certificate hung in my locker, my first tangible proof of progress. "You're doing everything right," Mrs. Bennett told me during our monthly check-in. But housing remains the primary concern. No memory of our separation. That night, in our tiny apartment, I rocked Ava to sleep in the secondhand glider chair Ellen had given us as a going-away present. My daughter's weight against my chest, her breath warm on my neck. This was everything. We had survived the impossible. We had found our way back to each other. For the first time since that hospital room, I allowed myself to fully exhale. If you've ever fought a system that seemed designed to break you, if you've ever had to prove your worth as a parent, hit that subscribe button. Our story isn't over. The real test of strength was yet to come. The years after regaining custody blurred together in a montage of firsts. Ava's first steps across our apartment floor. Her first word, "mama," which made me cry for an hour. Her first day of preschool. With each milestone, the shadow of our separation faded a little more, though it never disappeared completely. Working for Dr. Patel proved to be more than just a job. It became a pathway. He noticed my interest in patient care, the way I calmed nervous children, how quickly I learned medical terminology. You should consider nursing school, he suggested one afternoon as we filed charts. You have the aptitude and the compassion for it. The idea took root. I enrolled in prerequisite courses at the community college, attending night classes while Ava stayed with my neighbor, Mrs. Gonzalez, an elderly widow who adored her. Between work, school, and motherhood, sleep became a luxury, but each exhausted night felt purposeful. By the time Ava was 4, I had completed my prerequisites with a 3.9 GPA and been accepted to the nursing program. Dr. Patel arranged my work schedule around classes, and Mrs. Gonzalez became our unofficial grandmother. "You're building something special here," she told me one evening as we watched Ava draw elaborate pictures at the kitchen table. "Not many could do what you've done after such a rough start." Our life settled into a rhythm, modest but stable, challenging but joyful. I saved every extra dollar toward a future down payment on a small house. Ava thrived in preschool, making friends easily, her personality blossoming with confidence I never had at her age. Not once during those years did my parents reach out. No birthday cards for Ava, no phone calls, no acknowledgement of our existence. I'd driven past their house once, noticing new curtains in the windows, fresh paint on the shutters. Life had continued for them, as it had for me, separately. Mateo called occasionally from Seattle, where he'd moved for a job in tech. Our conversations were awkward, laden with the weight of what remained unsaid about our parents. "They ask about you sometimes," he admitted during one call. "But not about their granddaughter?" I asked, the hurt still fresh despite the years. His silence was answer enough. The nursing program was as rigorous as promised. Clinical rotations, exams, skills labs, all while maintaining my job and raising Ava. There were nights I fell asleep over textbooks. Mornings when only the thought of setting an example for my daughter got me out of bed. "Why do you have to study all the time, Mommy?" 7-year-old Ava asked one weekend, frustrated by my divided attention. I set aside my pharmacology notes and pulled her onto my lap, her growing body still fitting perfectly against mine. "Because I'm building our future," I explained. "Sometimes that means hard work now for something better later." "Like saving money for a toy you really want?" she asked. "Exactly like that," I smiled. "Except our toy is a better life." Graduation day arrived with surprising swiftness. Dressed in white, I accepted my nursing degree while Ava cheered from the audience, Mrs. Gonzalez and Dr. Patel beside her. No family occupied the seats I'd reserved, just in case. Their absence stung less than I expected. My chosen family filled the space with genuine joy. The San Francisco General Hospital job offer came 2 weeks later. The salary was nearly triple what I made at Dr. Patel's office, with benefits that included health insurance for Ava and a 401k with matching contributions, things that had seemed impossible luxuries just years before. We moved to a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a good school district. Ava started 3rd grade with new clothes, proper school supplies, and the confidence of a child who felt secure in her world. At night, she slept in a room with walls she'd helped paint yellow, surrounded by books and toys bought new, not secondhand. "We made it, baby girl," I whispered, watching her sleep on our first night in the new place. "We really made it." As years passed, our life expanded in ways I'd never imagined possible. I specialized in pediatric nursing, earning certifications that increased my value and income. We took our first vacation, a weekend at a beachside hotel where Ava built sandcastles and collected shells. I started a college fund for her, adding to it monthly with fierce determination. By Ava's 10th birthday, I had saved enough for a down payment on a small condo. The day we signed the papers, becoming homeowners felt surreal, a culmination of countless double shifts, night classes, and sacrifices. "This is our forever home?" Ava asked, spinning in circles in the empty living room, her voice echoing. "For now," I smiled, "until we decide to change our forever." That's when the first card arrived, a birthday card for Ava with a $50 gift card inside. No signature, but I recognized my mother's handwriting instantly. I stared at it for a long time, debating whether to throw it away or give it to Ava. In the end, I placed it on the breakfast counter. "This came for you. It's from your grandmother." Ava examined it with curiosity. "I have a grandmother." The simple question cut through me. Of course, she knew intellectually that my parents existed. I'd answered her questions honestly as she grew. But the reality that she'd never experienced grandparents, never received gifts or hugs or bedtime stories from them, hit differently in that moment. Yes, I said carefully, my parents. They haven't been part of our lives. She opened the card, read the generic printed message, and shrugged. $50 is nice. Can I get those new sneakers I wanted? Her indifference was both a relief and a sorrow. My parents were strangers to her, just names, not people who could hurt her. I'd protected her from that pain at least. A month later, my phone rang with my father's number, the first direct contact in over a decade. I let it go to voicemail, my heart racing, hands shaking like I was 18 again. His message was brief, formal. Lila, it's your father. I'm calling to check in. Things have changed here. Please call back when you can. I didn't return the call. Whatever had changed for them hadn't changed the past, hadn't erased the cold hospital room where they'd abandoned, not just me, but their grandchild. 3 more cards arrived over the next year. A Christmas card, an Easter card, another birthday card for Ava, this one signed Grandma and Grandpa Moreno in my mother's precise handwriting. I allowed Ava to receive them, watching carefully for any emotional impact. She collected the gift cards, wrote polite thank you notes at my insistence, but showed no particular interest in these distant relatives. Then came the call that changed everything. Mateo's number flashing on my phone at 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. Lila? His voice was tight, controlled in that way that signals bad news. Dad had a stroke. It's bad. They don't know if he'll recover fully. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Despite everything, the news hit me with unexpected force. Mom's falling apart, Mateo continued. She's not handling it well. I'm flying in tomorrow, but I can only stay a week. They need help, Lila. Real help. What are you asking me? I knew the answer before he said it. They need you. I know it's complicated, but... Complicated? I interrupted with a hollow laugh. They threw me out. They abandoned their granddaughter. They said she wasn't family. Silence stretched between us, heavy with shared history and divergent experiences. I know, he finally said. I remember. But people change, Lila. Dad might be dying. Whatever happens next, don't you want to know you did the right thing? After we hung up, I sat on my balcony staring at the city lights. The right thing. What was the right thing when the people who should have protected you had inflicted the deepest wounds? Beside me, the door slid open. Ava, in pajamas, her dark hair pulled back in a messy braid, sat next to me. Who was that? She asked, leaning against my shoulder. Your Uncle Mateo. Grandpa is sick. She processed this information with the straightforward logic of a child. Are we going to see him? Such a simple question with such a complicated answer. I looked at my daughter, this miracle who had survived everything, this child I'd raised to be kind even when kindness wasn't returned. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. It's a hard decision. She nodded, wise beyond her years. Because they hurt you. Yes. You always tell me that being brave sometimes means doing hard things, she said, repeating words I'd used during her first day of school anxieties. Maybe this is a hard thing. Out of the mouths of babes. My daughter, who had never known her grandparents' rejection, offering wisdom I struggled to access through my pain. That night, I made a decision that would alter our carefully constructed world, whether for better or worse, remained to be seen. Standing on my parents' doorstep felt like stepping backward in time. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the blue shutters faded, the once perfect lawn showing patches of brown. My heart hammered against my ribs as I rang the doorbell, Ava's hand clutched in mine. The door opened to reveal my mother, and the shock of her appearance stole my breath. Marisol Moreno, always impeccably dressed, hair perfectly styled, stood before me in wrinkled clothes, gray streaking her dark hair, deep circles shadowing her eyes. Lila, she whispered, as if saying my name might make me disappear. Her gaze dropped to Ava, widening with recognition and something that looked remarkably like fear. Hello, Mother, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. This is Ava. My daughter, raised with better manners than I'd been shown, extended her hand. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Moreno. My mother's composure cracked. Tears filled her eyes as she took Ava's small hand between both of hers. "You can call me Grandma," she said, her voice breaking on the word. Inside, the house smelled different, medicinal, with underlying notes of neglect. The living room had been converted into a makeshift hospital room. My father lay in an adjustable bed, a monitoring machine beeping steadily beside him. The right side of his face drooped slightly, his once commanding presence diminished by illness. His eyes found me, widening in recognition. He tried to speak, but the words came out slurred, unintelligible. "The stroke affected his speech and right side," my mother explained quietly. "The doctors say with therapy, he might regain some function, but—" She trailed off, the unspoken reality hanging between us. Victor Moreno, who had ruled our household with unwavering authority, now struggled to form a single word. The man who had told me I'd made my bed and must lie in it was now confined to his own, dependent on others for basic needs. Over the next few hours, I assessed the situation with my nurse's eye. Their house was in disarray. Medication schedules were haphazard. My mother clearly hadn't slept properly in days. My father needed specialized care she wasn't equipped to provide. "How are you managing his medications?" I asked, reviewing the numerous pill bottles on the kitchen counter. "I'm trying to follow the hospital's instructions, but there are so many, and some need to be taken with food, others without." She rubbed her temples. "I'm afraid of making a mistake." "And his physical therapy?" "The insurance only covers 2 home visits per week. The rest we're supposed to do ourselves, but I can't lift him properly. And when I try to help him stand, he gets frustrated and—" I established a system immediately. Medication organizers labeled by day and time, a proper schedule posted on the refrigerator, a notebook to track vital signs and symptoms. I showed my mother proper transfer techniques to help my father move from bed to chair without straining either of them. Mateo arrived the following day, his relief at seeing me palpable. "Thank you for coming," he said, hugging me tightly. "I didn't know if you would." Together, we confronted the practical realities: insurance paperwork, medical appointments, home care options. As an RN, I understood the healthcare system in ways my mother and brother didn't. I made calls, demanded services, arranged for equipment that would make my father's care easier. Each night, Ava and I returned to a nearby hotel. I wasn't ready to sleep under their roof, to fully re-enter the space that had once rejected us so completely. The distance felt necessary, protective for both Ava and myself. "Why is Grandpa having trouble talking?" Ava asked on our 3rd night, as I tucked her into the hotel bed. "The stroke damaged part of his brain," I explained. "It's like, imagine if a computer got its wires crossed. His brain knows what he wants to say, but can't send the right signals to make it happen." She considered this. "That must be really frustrating." "Yes," I agreed. "It is." "Is that why he cries sometimes when I'm reading to him? Because he's frustrated?" I hadn't noticed him crying during Ava's visits. She'd taken to reading him her favorite books each afternoon, sitting beside his bed, her voice clear and patient as she showed him pictures and explained the stories. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe he's moved by your kindness." On our 5th day, I arrived to find my mother sitting at the kitchen table, a photo album open before her. She looked up, eyes red-rimmed. "Do you remember this day?" she asked, pointing to a picture of me at about 8, holding a science fair trophy. "4th grade," I nodded. "Solar system project." "You were so proud," she said softly. "We were proud too, you know. You had a strange way of showing it." She closed the album, fingers lingering on its cover. "We made terrible mistakes, Lila, unforgivable ones." "Yes," I agreed. "You did. When your father and I got married, we promised each other our children would have better than we had. More stability, more opportunities." She shook her head. "Somewhere along the way, we confused better with perfect. We put so much pressure on you to succeed that we forgot to let you be human." "I wasn't asking for permission to be human, Mom. I was asking for support when I made a very human mistake." "I know that now." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "When you left, when we forced you to leave, we told ourselves it was tough love. that you'd come back, make the right choice, and things would go back to normal. Weeks passed, then months. Our pride kept us from reaching out. She took a shuddering breath. Then one day, I saw a young mother with a baby at the grocery store. She looked so much like you might have looked. I went home and cried for hours. Your father forbade me from contacting you, said you had to come to us. More pride, more stubbornness. I remained silent, letting her continue. Years passed. We saw your brother occasionally, but he rarely spoke of you. We didn't even know if you'd kept the baby. Her voice broke. Her name is Ava, I said quietly. She has a name. Ava, my mother repeated, the name awkward on her tongue. We didn't know if you'd kept Ava, if you were okay, if you were even alive sometimes. The not knowing was a kind of slow punishment. Deserved, but still painful. She reached across the table, not quite touching me. When your father had the stroke, he was alone in his study. I found him on the floor. While waiting for the ambulance, he kept trying to say something. Over and over, the same garbled words. It took me days to understand he was saying your name. Tears spilled down her cheeks. We've lost so much time, Lila. So many years we can never get back. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But please know that not a day has passed that I haven't regretted what we did. What I did. I stood, overwhelmed by emotions I couldn't quite name. I need to check Dad's medication. That night, after Ava fell asleep in our hotel room, I allowed myself to cry, really cry, for the first time since arriving. I cried for the scared teenage girl I'd been, for the support I desperately needed and never received. I cried for Ava's first smile, first steps, first words, moments my parents had chosen to miss. I cried for the family we might have been, for the relationships that had withered before they could fully form. The next morning, my father's speech therapist asked if I would assist with his session. I sat beside his bed as she guided him through exercises, watching his frustration mount with each failed attempt. Focus on the small victories, she encouraged him. Remember, recovery is a marathon, not a sprint. When she left, I remained, organizing his medications for the afternoon. He watched me, eyes following my movements with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. What? I finally asked, unable to bear the silent scrutiny. He struggled visibly, determined to form words. Rai, he managed, the single word clearly costing him enormous effort. I froze, pill organizer in hand. Dad. Wrong, he continued, frustration evident as he fought for each syllable. Wrong. Tears filled my eyes as I recognized what this admission cost him, not just physically, but to his pride. Victor Moreno had never admitted being wrong about anything in his life. Yes, I whispered. You were. He nodded slowly, painfully. His hand, the left one, still functional, reached for mine. After a moment's hesitation, I took it. His grip was weaker than I remembered, the skin papery with age, but the connection was real. We sat in silence, a decade of hurt suspended between us, not erased, not forgotten, but acknowledged. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. That evening, I made a decision. I think we should move to the house while I'm here, I told Ava. It would make helping Grandpa easier. She nodded seriously. And Grandma needs help too. She looks tired all the time. We arrived the next morning with our suitcases. My mother stood in the doorway, surprise giving way to cautious hope as she realized what was happening. The guest room is made up, she said, and I cleared out the office for Ava. It's not much, but... It's fine, I interrupted. This is temporary, just until we figure out long-term care for Dad. But we both recognized the significance of the moment. Me, willingly crossing the threshold I'd been forced over a decade ago. Her, welcoming the daughter and granddaughter she'd once rejected. Over the following weeks, a fragile new reality took shape. My nursing skills made me invaluable to my father's recovery. My organizational abilities brought order to the chaos of their home. Ava's presence brought light to rooms long darkened by regret. One night, after a particularly successful therapy session where my father had strung together a full sentence, my mother found me on the back porch. "I need to say something," she began, sitting beside me on the steps. "When I told you she wasn't family, Ava, it was the worst thing I've ever said. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew they were wrong. Family isn't just blood or names or appearances. It's love and commitment and showing up." She looked toward the house, where Ava was helping my father with his evening exercises, their laughter drifting through the open window. "You've shown us what family truly means, Lila. You showed up when we needed you, despite everything. You're teaching Ava to be compassionate, even to those who don't deserve it." She wiped tears from her cheeks. "I don't know if we can ever be a real family again, but I want you to know, I need you to know, that I recognize now what I was too blind to see then. She is family. You both are. You always were." 3 months after my father's stroke, I stood in my parents' kitchen, packing the last of Ava's school lunches before our return to San Francisco. My extended leave from the hospital was ending, and Ava needed to get back to her school and friends. "Do you have to go?" My mother hovered in the doorway, watching me seal sandwich bags with careful precision. "Yes," I said simply. "Our life is in San Francisco now. Dad's stable. The home health aide knows his routine, and you've got the support group contacts." She nodded, disappointment evident but unspoken. The past months had changed things between us, not erased the hurt, but built something new alongside it. A tentative bridge across a chasm still too wide to cross completely. "We could visit," I offered. "Maybe once a month. And there's FaceTime for in between." Her face brightened. "You do that?" "Ava should know her grandparents," I said. "The real ones, not the ones from 10 years ago." That evening, we gathered in the living room, my father in his wheelchair, my mother beside him, Ava, cross-legged on the floor, showing them her science project photos. I watched from the doorway, struck by the tableau's ordinariness and its extraordinariness. This scene, grandparents proudly examining a grandchild's work, was happening a decade later than it should have. "You were always the strongest one," my father said, his speech slow but clear after weeks of therapy. "Strongest of all of us." I met his gaze, remembering the man who'd once told me I'd ruined everything. Not by choice, by necessity. He nodded, understanding. "Best kind of strength. Earned." The next morning, as we loaded our suitcases into my car, my mother pressed a check into my hand. "For Ava's college fund," she whispered. "It's not enough, it can never be enough, but it's a start." I looked at the amount, substantial, representing years of saved guilt, and handed it back. "Put it in an account for her, something you control. Show her you're invested in her future consistently, not just with a single gesture." She blinked, surprised, then nodded slowly. "You're right. Of course you're right." As we pulled away, Ava waved enthusiastically from the passenger seat. "I like them," she declared. "Grandpa's funny when he's not frustrated, and Grandma makes good cookies." I smiled, watching my parents grow smaller in the rearview mirror. "They're trying." "Are you still mad at them?" she asked, turning to study my profile. "Not mad exactly," I said carefully. "I've forgiven them, but I haven't forgotten. Those are different things. Like when Emma was mean about my shoes last year, but now we're friends again. I remember she was mean, but I'm not angry anymore." "Something like that," I agreed, marveling at her simple wisdom. Except what they did was bigger than shoe comments. She considered this. "They must feel really bad then." "Yes," I said. "They do." "That's sad." She looked out the window thoughtfully. "But also good, right? Because it means they understand now." Understanding. Perhaps that was the true vindication. Not seeing them suffer or beg, but knowing they finally understood the magnitude of what they'd done, the years they'd lost, the trust they'd broken. In the months that followed, we settled into a new pattern: monthly visits to my parents' house, weekly video calls. Birthday celebrations and holiday gatherings, stilted at first, then gradually more natural. My father continued improving, eventually walking with a cane. My mother joined a grandparents' support group, finding community among others, building belated relationships. 1 year after my father's stroke, I received a job offer from a prestigious hospital near my parents' town. Better pay, better hours, a pediatric specialization I'd always wanted. Part of me suspected my father had pulled strings, using old connections despite his reduced circumstances. "We're not moving here for you," I told them clearly when I announced my decision to accept the position. "We're moving here because it's a good opportunity for us. The fact that you'll see more of Ava is a side benefit." "We understand," my mother said, though hope brightened her eyes. We found a house 20 minutes from theirs, close enough for regular visits, far enough to maintain boundaries. The day we moved in, they arrived with plants for the garden and takeout for dinner, careful not to overstep. As we ate around our new dining table, I watched my father help Ava with her math homework, his engineer's mind still sharp despite his physical limitations. My mother had brought photo albums, not just old ones of my childhood, but new ones she'd created documenting the past year. Ava's visits, her school accomplishments. "We're keeping records now," she explained when I raised an eyebrow. "No more lost time." Later, as they prepared to leave, my father pulled me aside. His speech, though improved, still required patience to understand. "Proud of you," he said, each word deliberate. "Not because of job or house, because of her." He nodded toward Ava, who was showing my mother her new bedroom. "You raised her right, better than we did." The compliment struck deep, acknowledging what I'd accomplished without them, because of their absence, not despite it. "Thank you," I said simply. "We can't fix past," he continued, frustration creasing his brow as he fought for each word. "But future? Different story." As I watched them drive away that evening, Ava waving until their car disappeared around the corner, I reflected on our journey. 10 years ago, I'd stood alone in a hospital room, my newborn daughter taken from my arms, my parents' rejection still ringing in my ears. I'd been homeless, hopeless, with nothing but determination and love for a baby I barely knew. Now I stood on the porch of my own home, a respected nurse, a homeowner, a mother to a brilliant, compassionate daughter. And yes, a daughter myself to parents who had failed catastrophically, but were trying, imperfectly, to make amends. The most powerful vindication wasn't in their suffering or their need for me, though there was a certain symmetry there. It wasn't even in my success, though that sweet triumph was mine alone to claim. No, the true vindication was in the life I'd built on my own terms. In the boundaries I could now enforce from a position of strength. In the knowledge that I had broken a cycle, that Ava would never know conditional love, never fear that one mistake would cost her everything.